wanted to approach today as a way of sharing what I think of as my language in clay. And it's a language of pinches, and all of these pinches I think of as being these records of touch, records of time, records of process. And that's the through line connecting my pinch pot making to my kiln firing, my kiln building. I see them all as very related. So, the thesis. I'm going to go through a couple of different stages today, and I'm hoping that y'all will participate also, because I don't know how to talk about it, as well as like you need to be feeling it for the words that come out of my mouth to connect, I think. So I'll pass out some clay in a minute, so just prepare your fingers, do a little bit of hand warm up. But I'm going to start with how I make my straightforward pinch pots. These pinch cups, they come in bowl form, they come in cup form. It's how I make pots like this. I'm going to start there, and from there I'm going to scale it up and talk a little bit about how I use that language of pinches on bigger forms that I build from these half domes, and then taking it even a step further, connecting those half domes into multiple pieces and using this same kind of language of pinching on these bigger forms, which has really been my journey this year, is taking what felt very self-contained to me and figuring out how to translate that onto bigger, different forms. So that's going to be the process for today. And I drove this here in a car. And I was thinking, what? Well, no, because I was worried it would like it's still a little wet. So the whole time my arm was out and my bicep was getting really sore, but it made me want to see like someone do a GACA demo like in their car, basically. Like, this is the 2-hour process that goes into like transporting artwork. So I'm gonna get that out of the way just so that we can all see each other. Okay, I brought some clay. I've made some balls. I'm hoping that each of you can have one so that you can follow along as I'm talking through the pinch pot making. Don't feel like you have to make a pinch pot, but I want you to have something where you can use your fingers to try and understand in a different way what I'm saying. Just because that's how my brain works, and it's my demo, so. I'm gonna bring you into Grace's brain. Okay, please come grab a ball of clay. This is actually a mix of balconies and fig. It was like a bag of clay that was in between like pubs at Armadillo. So it's like half fig, half balconies. Some of y'all will probably get more balconies than fig and vice versa. Either way. And I'm going to be using B-Mix. B-Mix is the clay that I pinch with primarily, but I like using fig too. The B-Mix I just find like very, once your hands get used to it, I feel like it is really, really forgiving. Very plastic, but also very sturdy, which for me, doing these kinds of hand-built pots is really important. So I don't wedge the ball of clay if it's coming off of the, fresh bag. I do wedge it if I've done something to it, if it's clay that has been used already before. This is my dad.
Are you using the Cone 10 B-Mix or?
It's the Cone 10 B-Mix. I really like using the woodfire B-Mix too, but it's like $2 more and I don't know if it makes, I'm still trying to decide what kind of difference it makes. So if anyone has some like side-by-side comparisons, like call me. I warm my hands up by warming the B-Mix up. You have to get it a little soft, see where it's at. And then I approach it like I would wheel throwing. I have something down, a little square of plastic, a little square of newspaper, and I plop my ball of clay into the center of that banding wheel. And just like throwing, I need to center my ball of clay before I start to pinch it. And I know this is hard with your ball of clay in your seat, but I'm just gonna feel it out. So I center my ball of clay into something kind of like a volcano. You see now why I have that little scrap of paper there. And this method of pinching pots was taught to me by Paul Briggs. Paul Briggs is an incredible artist who was also like a pastor before he was a ceramicist, and just has this incredible way of talking through what clay means to him, and it's a very influential way to learn pinching. But this approach to pinch pots comes from him. And essentially, I think when we learn how to make pinch pots, it's like the very first thing we learn, but you start off by just trying to get the walls thin and approaching it from like a wall perspective rather than the way that I start, which is very much like throwing. I'm gonna try to go all the way down, like open up the clay first. I put my thumb in the center and I start spiraling it out. This left hand is my collaring hand. Again, very like throwing. I'm containing the clay with that hand, while my right hand, I'm not trying to widen the opening. I'm just trying to go straight down to where I want the floor of the pot to be. And this is true whether you're adding a foot or not. I'm gonna add a foot to this pot so you can kind of see how I approach the foot. But that's how I start. I just spiral in, open the clay, and I've got the hole going down to where I want that base to be. Once I'm there, I set up the foot. And the foot is really just like a sketch to start off with. You'll find you go back and forth with these pots a lot. So I don't want to go too far with the foot until I finish the top. And to open up the foot, I use my finger, dive right into the center, and pull those walls open. You can kind of see how that looks.
Are we supposed to be
Yeah.
mirroring your experience?
Yeah,
Okay.
mirroring or like, or doing what you need to do to hear the words, for the words to translate, I guess. Yeah, if that's mirroring, that's great. If it's just trying out different pinches, that's great. But I feel like following along with your fingers is like a helpful way to understand the process.
So you go straight in from the bottom?
Yeah, I go straight in from the bottom and I pull that wall back and go all the way around, spiraling around, pulling one little bit of that wall at a time. And this is just, like I said, a sketch of the foot. I'm gonna use my thumb to very gently push up the sides of those walls, give myself a little bit more clay, a little bit more of a sense of what I can get out of that foot. because this whole process is about finding where the clay is on the pot that you're making and moving that clay where you want it to be. So right now, the way that the clay is distributed, it looks like this, but we're gonna be pulling those walls up just like when you're throwing. And the whole idea is to feel where that clay is around the pot and redistribute it. So here, I'm just pulling up the walls of the foot just very slightly. And that's enough foot for me right now, because I'm gonna have to flip this pot over, set it on the foot. I don't wanna go too far until I've done more of the top. So I've established the foot, now I'm gonna come back in and really pull the walls of this pot. The way that I think about this, it's like, this is my little visual aid. We're starting with this drawing on the right. Think about it the same way that you do pulling. You're trying to get the lower part of the wall, the thickness that you want, and then carry the rest of that clay up with you, because I know that my hand can't go back down to the bottom and re-pinch it. So I'm making the pot as I travel up, I'm not gonna go back. And that's like the limitation of my hand. So thumb goes back in the pot, my left hand is still collaring, and now my right fingers, and you're gonna be able to see them, find that ridge of clay and start to pinch. I go over it really slowly. I'm not trying to move that clay quickly. It's very like rhythmic. This is, you know, this is like the process that puts the touch, that puts the impressions, that puts all of this intention into the pot. And so I want to be very intentional, very repetitive, very, like really find a rhythm with those pinches, because all of that labor, that whole process, like that's what I want to be really visible. And you can use this left hand to collar in. I think a lot of people find when they're pinching pots the first time that it really wants to go out in that big bowl shape. This is your collaring hand, this holds it in. And I just slowly make my way up the pot. And this is what this right side drawing is establishing. You know, you're getting that first steps of that wall as thick as you want them, and this is the rest of that clay traveling up the pot as you go. And I'm just squeezing with these 3 fingers. This is where I tend to spend the most time, is on this like first ring of pinches. It's where, you know, you're like really just starting to, it's like how the first pull, you know, you don't get very high, but you're moving a lot of clay. You gotta feel where all that clay is. Every so often I come in and I check and I like see if it's still in center. And I add a little bit more pinching where I need to bring it back into center. And if y'all want to like feel where this pot is at right now, you can kind of get a sense for like where that clay is. And I like to think of this process as a process of like nothing added, nothing subtracted. All of the clay is clay that was contained in that original ball. And there's something like very beautifully metaphorical about that, but also in a practical sense, keeps you from having to worry about those attachments. Like they look very delicate and they're also very strong pots. Like all of the clay that ends up in this final form, like however it gets distributed, was there from the very beginning.
Is that the case too when you make your larger pots?
These, I tend to combine processes. So I use a lot of these pinch pots on them, but they also have these like half-built domes that are coil-built, and that helps me get that height. And then I like attach these kinds of pinch pots onto them. So these become like pieces of the forms. While you're passing that around, I brought some of my favorite clay books, and I think they help explain like how I think about the pinching too. I approach it really like this process of building. There's this book called A Pattern Language, which if you don't know it, check it out. It's amazing. It is a language. It's a pattern language for building villages, towns, homes. It gets more and more granular. And I think of the pinches that way too. Each of the choices that are made, each of the choices that are part of the language have a different impact on how that pot makes people feel, how that pot makes me feel, what kind of touch is contained in it, what kind of process is contained in it. And so it's very much a process of like that kind of building and revealing the labor that is going into it as you travel all the way around that pot. Yeah.
As for pinching, does it matter if it's pinched like in the same rotation or can it go back and forth?
I go in the same rotation. Again, it's like the wheel throwing, you know, where if I'm gonna spiral wedge my clay, I'm going to make sure that the spiral is in the direction of like, that the wheel is moving. And similarly with this, I want to make sure like that I'm continuing to, because I mean, you can do it the other way and you'll see that. It's like the choice of it. Yeah. Yeah. Smoothing is like a very, very strong movement. The smoothing is going to move the clay really quickly. So if I'm smoothing, it's because I'm trying to get it really tall really fast. So I like to squeeze just a little bit at a time with just like these little pinchers until I get higher up in the cup. Thank you. Ooh, it's so nice now. It's all burnished. Until I get higher up in the cup, and then I'll start to like change my pinches. But I think like that kind of pulling of the clay leaves really beautiful impressions. So I like to use that at the very end when I can make this dynamic movement with that kind of pulling. All right, so I've got the bottom of my wall established, and now I want to give myself something to pinch. So I want to leave this kind of ridge of clay and come back later and use that to make these like leaves, to make these kinds of pinches that come off. So I want to leave that clay there and keep moving up the wall. So what I do is I take my thumb and I just mark off where that ridge of clay is going to be. I'm leaving like half an inch, that ridge of clay that's just in between the wall that I've thinned out and the clay above it. And that ridge of clay is just going to stay there. That's going to hang out until I'm ready to come back to it. So I'm going to keep pinching up the wall. At this point, I like to set it back down on the bat or the banding wheel see how close I got to it being like on center, but it's fine because we come back and pinch later. And now is when I come in with these two pinchers, and in order to create this like waist here on the pot, I'm gonna push in. Go all the way around. It's still very similar, very like rhythmic, repetitive movement. But this time, I'm pushing and squeezing the clay together to try and bring that wall up bit by bit. Also, I'm sorry, this is not like the most visible thing in the world, but I'm gonna go back around and make sure that I've got like a really consistent thickness there, and that it's consistent with the thickness of the wall underneath the ridge too. And maybe at this point I want to just like keep going and do something to finish this ridge of clay at the top, but you can also leave multiple ridges on your pot. It's all about just moving and putting the clay where you want it to go.
Do you have any problems with the clay drying out?
With the B-mix, I get little cracks, and I find that it's like a really easy clay to smooth those little cracks out, but they do happen. I also, you know, I always have like a bag of wet clay and a bag of dry clay that I'm kind of working with at the same time, and it's a very fine line where it gets too dry and there's too many cracks to the point where it just like is a little bit too much work to smooth that cracking out. So it is definitely a fine line, and I do get the cracks, but I like the B-mix because it makes it possible to kind of smooth those out and work through them.
So you don't really try to add water or anything like that?
I do add water, but I only add water to these ridges. So what I do as I'm going throughout, if I'm like working on a bigger piece, or I have a couple pieces that are like waiting in the wings, what I do is just have a little brush handy, and I add it just around the ridge, because that's the only part I'm going to come back and continue to pinch. And that's the part that like gets a little bit annoying if it starts to crack while I'm doing it. So I just add the water around there, and these walls I leave as is. So I made like another little ridge of clay here. And now I'm going to continue to pinch up from there, knowing that I'm going to come back to that little ridge when I'm ready. Still going all the way around. And it's really fun to like make pinches that make sense for your hands specifically. I like to make these things called pinch libraries that I call pinch libraries, that are a collection of all the different pinches that I like to make. And they all leave, you know, different impressions, different patterns. So maybe while you are pinching, you will be discovering little pinches specific to you. All right, cool. These are the stages that I consider myself like I've gotten to like the sketch kind of stage. Once I get here, then I start strategizing for how I want to add the decorative pinches, finish the foot, finish the rim. So I'm gonna come back, and like I was saying before, I'm just gonna add a little bit of water to each of these ridges of clay to keep those moist. This is a process I like to go through with my eyes closed too, if that feels fitting to you. It can help you really feel where the clay is at, and where it can go. There's an excellent exercise in this book by Paulus Berenson called Finding One's Way with Clay that talks about pinching to failure. And in that exercise, you pinch the walls until they break, until they start to crack. And it's so much further than you think is possible. And I really like to think about that kind of feeling when I'm approaching this, because I know, like, you know, it can move, you know, like it wants to move with you, and it can, it's in there. The clay is in there. So once I get to this stage, I come back and I work on the foot. So we've got a little bit of cracking here, that's okay. I'm just gonna apply a little bit of water. There's a very specific consistency that I like the clay to be in to pinch it. And it's not super wet. So I'll add a little bit of water and then I'll kind of wait and take a look and see what's here, what we can do. When I'm adding these decorative pinches, it's me finding where there's extra clay and coming back in and finding something to do with that clay. And also it's about like giving some intention and shape to what I'm trying to make, like making each part of the cup feel like it's supposed to be there, because like the pinch being there justifies it being there, you know. So for example, there's this transition, you know, from the foot to the cup itself. So it's nice to add like little pinches there to establish like, okay, this is a part of the pot to notice. Like, this is a part of the pot that is significant to the structure. Like, here's the pinch that shapes that. Now I'm sort of doing my final go around with the foot. I don't want it to be too thin, like it has to hold a fair amount of weight. But I want it to like raise the pot up off of the table and look nice. You can add like little floral pinches to the foot. Like in this case, I've got a lot of extra clay saved down there. So you can pick it up and you can add these like beautiful little petals that give the foot a flare. This is like how the pinch libraries develop. You know, and see how like that sits with it. Once I've got the foot established, I'll flip the pot back over. I'll take a look, I'll see where it's at. And now I start to address these ridges of clay that I've left behind. So I hope you're feeling this as you feel your pot too, but I'm gonna come back in and like, okay, there's like a lot of clay there. I can feel how much clay is there. And it makes me think about the kind of pinch that I wanna do, what kind of clay is available for that. You know, for something like this, man, there's always so many options and it makes it really hard. But if I'm thinking about the shape of the cup, this is kind of an overhang. And so maybe to emphasize the overhang, I'll grab like a big chunk of that clay and do a big downward pinch And I'm trying to use all of the clay that's there. My hand on the inside is supporting it. And you can end up with this like nice skirt. I think a lot about like, I mean, again, it comes back to these like buildings for me. Awnings, overhangs, you know, that little like bit that comes off of a shed that's like just an edge, but like it's enough so you don't get rained on. Like all of those kinds of shapes are the shapes that I'm thinking about as I build these like, you know, cornices and columns and yeah, it's like decorating these like miniature buildings in my head. And above the overhang, you know, you wanna climb. Like my eye has seen the bottom and like now it wants to go up the pot. And so for a pinch of this wall carrying me up to this top bit of clay, like I'll try to bring the visual attention up. So there's a pinch that kind of looks like a spine, and I'm gonna do it and then turn it and show you. So this kind of like spine or vine sort of pinch, that's carrying that attention up. And also it's like, I line it up with, you know, different bits. Like I want the pinches to interact with each other. So it's gonna carry itself over the overhang. This also helps emphasize the waste that I've tried to pinch into the pot. And so those can produce like a really beautiful spine pattern on the outside, and also on the inside, you get like the reflection of that kind of pinch. Yeah. And the inside, I'm always like, man, I wish I could just like flip this pot inside out because they look so cool. Like, yeah, I don't even want to, they're just like, yeah. You know, they look like this on the inside. And they become these really incredible pathways for glaze too. And I'll talk a little bit about that with the surface, but all of these are ridges for that glaze to break and move. And so I've gotten to the top. I've used all the clay throughout my pot right now, but I have this like extra bit of clay up here at the top. I'm not just gonna leave that sitting. Like I want to use every bit of clay available to me. So I'm gonna turn the very tops of these, I'm gonna carry that spine through, and I'm gonna make these into like little leaves. And that's the same way that I'm like squeezing and pinching that wall together. I'm just squeezing and pinching to bring that clay up for the leaves. I wish it was easier to see it. If it's easier to like get behind me or something. I'll do one from this direction in case it's useful. But I'm just squeezing together until I've used every little bit of that clay. And brought it all the way up.
So you're doing really specific handbuilding.
Yes.
I can see that.
I don't know if they can either.
Yeah, but I don't know if you want to describe it.
Yeah. There's a ridge of clay in the middle, and I'm pushing together and slightly up, and together and slightly up. And it helps me to visualize the direction that I want the clay to move. I want the clay to come together and go up. And so my fingers are just lifting it there. And I think the difference between like it leaving an impression like this and it shaping the pot the way that we were using it to shape the waist of the pot earlier is this is a very singular, strong movement, and that's it. You want that impression to stay. So I'm just coming in, I do it once, I move to the next one, I do it once, I move to the next one, I do it once, I move to the next one, and then I like finish off that leaf. So once I get to this point, I'm really trying to like cement that touch into the ridge of clay. Yay, I have these nice leaves. Let me give them like a little bit of direction. I want you to like fall into the cup, you know? And cool, like I'm into it, but there's still these like little bits of clay here. You know, there's this like little extra weight. And so my eye is just really drawn to that, and I'll come in and I just want to like do something with it. Like I just want to find where that extra clay is and move it. And I'm making sure I'm doing the same thing all the way around. You know? And there's just like so many different ways that you can go with this. I don't just have to move the clay as it is. Now that I have this big ridge of clay, like you can come in and you can make yourself this like, there's just a ton there, this whole knob of clay. And I'm just gonna pull it out and like leave it there for myself. This is another way you can use it. You know, I'm just gonna leave this big knob of clay there. It's so much. I'm always just like, every time I touch the pot, I'm like, there's more clay. And it's a little bit wet. The ridge is a little bit wetter right now than I usually move it. And then you can come in, you know, there's like more clay right at the top here. I'm gonna save all that clay that's there at the top. And then if I flip this piece over, there's all this clay here at the bottom, so you can pull all of that out. And now you have these like really beautiful ears of clay to work with. And these you can turn into anything. I mean, they look really cool as is, or you can like turn them into little spirals. Or, and this is like the most beautiful Paul Briggs pinch I feel like I've ever seen. He'll come in and he'll make these into these beautiful leaves, where you can bring that clay together and pinch these leaves off of the side and spiral those up, you know. Yeah. You can go back and forth so that the leaves change direction. And they can kind of spiral over and hug each other. So all of these are just, you know, fun ways of like gathering up that clay and using it in these different ways. So now I've got these like cool spirally leaves. Maybe I want to do this sort of like, you know, back and forth pattern with this little bit of clay to kind of mirror how the leaves are going back and forth. This is where I really like enjoy, you know, I kind of like go in on the process and like get really internal, and I'm like, ooh, like what are all the different like cool shapes that this can make, you know?
Have you found that your grip strength has gotten really good?
It's very, yeah, I do those like rock climber
Yeah.
grip things, you know, where people like, all the rock climbers are like, oh, there's no way. But yeah.
Or opening jars.
Yeah, good at opening jars. Especially with the B-mix. It can really, you gotta do some hand stretches.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. And so I've got a little bit of extra clay up here. And so I'm gonna kind of pinch it up and do this little fold. And I don't, you know, I plan out shapes, but I'm not always planning out all of the pinches. Like the pinches, mostly I'm like feeling what clay is there, looking at where I've gone with the shape so far, and thinking about my, you know, internal language of pinches to figure out what's gonna fit in there best. You know, and you just, again, it's this very like rhythmic, process-driven, repetitive, yeah, building blocks. How did everyone's pinch counts go? Good. Yeah. Did y'all develop any personal favorite pinches? Pinches that define you and your pinching process? Not yet. You can give it time. Anjali, you got one? Long. Okay, cool. Yeah. Big ridges. I mean, these ones can get really fun because you can also, don't just feel like you need to pinch, you can also like press in, you know? There's ways that you can make these like really highlight the shape of all of those together. This is where that like nice pull comes in, you know. All of these are places for like the glaze to break or like the flash to happen. So, cool. So that's kind of like the general approach that I have in mind. And I was making cups like these for a long time, like bowls that are similar like that, where, you know, I'm pinching out the bowl and finding that shape, like cool, like lamp shades, you know, really enjoying that sort of like process of pinching and like finding those kinds of little spines. And but I wanted to figure out what that looked like on a bigger scale. And so I started to break my rule, nothing added, nothing subtracted. And I added and subtracted a whole bunch of stuff.
How much clay did these two start out as?
Like a handful?
Oh.
Yeah.
Very scientific.
It's very scientific, extremely scientific. I didn't hand them. Is there a scale though?
I'm just curious.
I'm curious too. Because there's nothing added, nothing subtracted, so we can come back and measure them.
Yeah.
What about the
Well, a little water. A little water.
Okay, all right. Y'all are.
We have a scientist.
You know what you're doing out here. Is it?
If it's in water, you evaporate.
Yeah, totally. With those warm hands.
Yeah.
She warmed her hands up. She
So
said.
this is exactly a pound of
Because of the
clay.
HVAC system.
Yeah. So that's 1 pound.
Yeah, that's why.
Which y'all are more than welcome to come up here and feel it and hold it.
Yeah, I know.
This one's heavier. Yeah, that one's like a pound and 1. Wait. What's that? Is it? Oh wait, is it? Wait. It went to the 1. It's a pound. Okay, it's a pound. It's a pound. This is like a just under a pound and a quarter. And so I started to build these kinds of dome-shaped pieces, which I actually, I took a class from Rebecca Proctor, and she has this incredible, she teaches this like upside down building process with the coils that's amazing and like really changed my whole approach. Because I think of this as a bowl. I'm gonna build it upside down. It's gonna be very structurally sound because I'm building it upside down. I'm not trying to coil out, I'm trying to coil in. And I'm gonna cut it off the bat, flip it, and I've got myself a bowl. And I'm gonna show y'all just like the very beginnings of my process for that. But essentially, like where it gets to is a stage like this. I've added these coils on the outside. I've added this coil around the top rim. And now I can like take some clay like this and pinch a foot, like pinch a pot that is in this world, add it as a foot onto the top of that, and the language grows. So instead of pinching to leave these bits of clay behind, I added coils in this case. But they just become, more ridges for more fun things. So I'll keep those damp because we're gonna come back in and pinch those.
So the main body that we're looking at, you pinch this pot, or?
This one I coil built, and I'm going to show you all a little bit of how I do that process. But for these bigger forms, I coil build them upside down. And this one, for example, is 2 coil built pots, 2 domes built upside down that I then cut off and stuck together. It's the same with this one, same idea. 2 separate coil built forms that I then stuck together. Same with this pot. And you can see it with the lampshade too. This was the base of that dome. I coiled that up, added a pinch pot on the top of it, and then you can just like add all kinds of stuff around it. And keep the questions coming. So I tend to be really fast and loose with my coils. I think of them as like, this is material. This is material that I'm gonna come back and pinch later. So I don't roll them out, I just squeeze them. And I do them pretty thick until I get to the top, and then I start to do them thinner. I've got my bat attached, and I'm just going to, in this case, trace along the outside, squeezing that coil into place.
So you're not really concerned about the thickness being even at all?
I'm not, because I'm gonna pinch them.
You're gonna feel it later.
Exactly. So because I'm just adding a couple layers and then coming back and pinching that coil, like that's when I'm gonna really establish my wall thickness. Make sure that's really nice and well attached on the inside. Really well attached on the outside. I don't slip and score between my coils either. Again, because I have like a pretty extensive process of pinching and like scoring the wall, that I just try to get the material on there and then work with it on there. So again, kind of squeezing out my coil.
How thick of a wall is the dome after you've worked it all the way up to the top? How thick would you say the wall is in your dome?
I mean, this right now is maybe 1/2 inch, and I'll pinch it to maybe 1/4 of an inch, something like that. It depends on the pot and the placement. With these, I leave a little bit of extra clay at the bottom because that's gonna be the ridge that when I cut it and flip it, I'm gonna add a pinch, like some kind of, you know, leaf or something at the top. So I do leave a little bit of extra at the bottom. And after that, you know, I probably pinch it to about, yeah, I would say like a 1/4 of an inch. But also like, and I'm connecting my coils by pushing down from the inside, overlapping that clay with the previous coil and sort of squeezing from the outside. That's also kind of like helping make my coils more uniform as I go. But yeah, also like if I'm making a dome that's gonna be for the bottom of a 2-dome piece, I'll let the, like for this, for example, or here's a really good example, like this dome, I wanna leave slightly thicker than this dome because it's supporting more weight. So it's a subtle difference, but in my head, I'm trying to keep them not far off from each other in terms of thickness, but if the base can have like a little bit of extra heft, it helps. So once I get to this part with my coil, I probably do 2 or 3 at a time. Again, I'm like limited by the size of my hand. So every pot I make, in order to pinch it, has to fit within that hand. I'm coming in, I'm connecting everything on the inside, and I'm gonna come and connect everything on the outside. And I'm just pushing that clay down to overlap those coils. And it's that same kind of like rhythmic, repetitive motion of the pinching. I use my trusty Yeah, I really like limitations. Like I really like rules. They help me be creative. But I got to a point with these pots where I felt like I wasn't the process felt stale, I think. I wasn't trying anything new. I wasn't learning anything new. I felt like I was repeating myself. And I just felt very, very stuck, I think. And I didn't think that it was because of that rule. I didn't think it was the nothing added, nothing subtracted bit that was holding me there, because I had found that rule extremely helpful in like pushing me to make different creative choices. But as soon as I like slipped and scored an attachment on, I was like, you can do all kinds of stuff with clay. And it really allowed me to think of this as a language more than like just the process itself. I was like, oh, these are bits and pieces that I can carry through. And I have new rules for myself. But those new rules are pushing me in, the creative directions that I want to go into now. And I'll need to change those rules at some point too. But it was like a moment, where I just added an attachment and I was like, oh, I still see my voice in this. Like I still see what I'm trying to do in this. And now I have all these different ways of exploring it. Yeah.
How did you get started in clay?
I did not always do clay. I used to be a documentary and video editor. I worked in film. And then I lost a lot of my work during the pandemic. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time, and I moved to the Catskill Mountains, and there was a woodfire pottery there, and they needed assistance. And so I had been into clay and interested in clay and learning about clay for a long time. At that point, I worked at a studio that was a co-op. So that's where I learned how to fire electric kilns and mix glazes and everything like that. And so I came in and I started helping these woodfire potters in the Catskills, and they taught me all about firing atmospheric kilns. And that is what really got me hooked. It was kind of through the firing that I left the world of film and started to do clay as my career. And I feel it's kind of funny because these pots are a nightmare to fire. They're so silly. And but I really see a relationship between the two. Now my job is firing kilns, and I really enjoy taking part in the wood firings, doing these soda firings, all of those atmospheric results. but it's like, yeah, that is interesting. Like, these pitches are interesting to me because of the way that the fire comes over and touches them. And like, firing is interesting to me because of the ways that I know that it leaves this kind of evidence of its process on the pots as well. And so they're very, yeah, I think they're inextricably linked for a lot of people. And for me, it's like they're part of that same, it's like all process driven. You see those bits, you see those touches, like you can see the pathway of the flame. All of that feels a lot like pinching pots to me. And so I like to think about the ways that my pitches interact with like the way that the flame touches it. And it's the same with kiln building. Like now I build and repair a lot of kilns. And that has been this really incredible way of not only understanding like the firing differently, because now I can like, it's like seeing the whole internal structure in my head, like the way the draft works and the way it flows, like it's all built into these shapes of the kilns. But it also really changed the way that I think about the pots that I make. Like, I feel like it sounds a little bit like oversimplified or something, but like, you're stacking the bricks. You're stacking the bricks to build a building, to build a vessel, to build a pot. Like the kiln is this pot that is holding all of the other pots. Like it's this vessel that's holding all of the other vessels. And you're firing the kiln just like you're firing your pots. And the kiln changes every time it's fired, the same way that you're getting these effects on your pot. And it's just like, it's like the whole thing is built up of these like tiny individual pieces. And like these little pieces are, this touch and then this touch and then this touch, and like each of these little touches. And then the individual pieces of the kiln, it's like brick by brick by brick. Or like, you're cutting all these little shims, piece by piece by piece. And yeah, and I just think it's like the coolest thing, especially to repair kilns. We were talking about this a little bit at dinner, but like repairing kilns, you're seeing all the evidence of the person who built the kiln originally. All those little like tiny affordances, like little shims here and there. And I love thinking about my pots in that way. Like when you touch them, like that's the shape of like my fingerprint, and like to think about, to think about that in such a visible way, I just think it's so cool. It makes me like really enjoy it. So this is how I build these like dome forms.
Can I ask maybe a silly question? Why are you using the side of that rib?
For
smooth it.
Yeah, this is my pre-smoothing process. So when I'm using the tooth ribbed, I'm thinking about it as my connecting. I'm like making sure that all of the coils are like joined together really, really solid. And the tooth ribbed, the toothed rib carries the clay from one coil onto another and vice versa. So that's what's gonna really like hold them together. So once I get to this point, I'm starting to make my coils a little bit, not smaller, but like a little bit lighter, which makes them smaller. And I'm putting them on the inside. Once I'm trying to curve in, I'm really trying to place that coil on the inside ridge of the coil that came before it. And that is what is going to help carry the pot in on that curve. And then you're going to continue to enhance that once you've joined it.
You ever paddle the clay?
I do, yes. I love, yeah, they're very helpful for making this look like nice and smooth and dome-like. So once I get to the point where I've like created my dome shape, connected all the coils, at the very top, I'll put like a little plug or like a little, slab of clay to close that last little hole. And once I've contained all the air in there, then I come in with a paddle like this, and that's when I like really refine the shape of that whole dome. And because all of the air is inside of the pot at that point, it's a lot easier to use that paddle to good effect, I think. Like, you're not gonna collapse it in the way that you would if that hole was still at the top, because it's got that back pressure from the air. So I don't need to go through this whole process of showing you, but this is how I get there.
Do you have any tools that you don't use or like rules about using tools?
I try to use my like personal little internal rule is to use as few tools as possible. But that's not always cool. I don't know. I like to see, like, because part of what I'm interested in is like all those like little bits and impressions. I like to use my hands as much as possible. But yeah, but that's not a hard and fast rule. That's just like a game I play with myself. But I brought like essentially like every tool that I ever used to build these pots. I use the serrated rib to connect all the coils. I use this metal rib, like this is what I come back with, and then smooth out that surface. And I'm going real fast here, and so I would do like a lot better job of connecting these and smoothing them, but that's what that metal rib will do for me. I do slipping and scoring. I use the pin tool to like mark, this is like where my foot's gonna go or something like that. Sometimes I'll reach in if my thumb can't get there and do some smoothing with the little tab of the wooden tool, and then I have a paddle and like a little knife, and that's kind of basically it. Also, I think like, the real benefit of being a hand builder is that you can like travel light and like leave no trace, kind of. So I want to really like get to luxuriate in that benefit also. I follow my plan to a certain point, and then it's like total improv. I basically follow my plan to here. And this is like where the plan stops, and then I just like start adding things as my brain's like, ooh, this is exciting. But I do like draw these out, I think about these, and I think about them like as like, oh, this is kind of like the canvas that I can play on now. And so this would keep going and it would close over, and like you get the idea. And then voila, it ends up looking like this. I've done a lot of smoothing, I've done a lot of paddling, it's closed in. I've added this coil all the way around, and now I'm gonna pinch a pot to like become this foot. And this is where I start getting like, additive with all the little bits. I tried this one earlier. but I'm not sure if it's like the right fit for it.
It's perfect.
I don't know, there's like some, no big deal. There's like something I've been struggling with a little bit lately, and it's the foot. Because like, okay, big difference, super low. When I look at it, it feels so stable. It brings me like comfort. Very different, you know? This is like, I feel like there's a lot of tension in that foot, and it gives me like tense feelings. And that's nice too. And like, I also like that, but the narrowness of that foot, the height of that foot compared to the pot itself, has been like, yeah, just gives an entirely different feeling than something lower and joined. And so when I look at this, I'm like, huh, you know, like, I can see it. Like, I can see, it's like a fruit bowl. I can kind of like see all the little cornices, and like my head is like, ooh, like what happens in this building? But it's also like a slightly narrow foot for the width of the bowl, and that gives me like a little bit of tense feeling, but also maybe that's good. Anyway, I haven't decided. What's that?
I think you should attach it.
Okay. Oh, I need to slip and score it. So sometimes I like make a couple of those different feet and try them out. This bee mix is still quite wet. I try to be really conscious about bending these little circles because they do warp if you are not careful. And so I try to be really conscious about where I pick them up and how.
Is that just water?
This is just water. Yeah. Also, I feel like I'm like, you know, this is a little bit, I'm trying to be extra good potter today. I'm not always extra good potter about making my connections, I'll just say that.
You just use water or you make slip?
I just use water if I even use water. I like to work really wet. And so I try to, and I work pretty quickly. And so I try to work wet enough and quickly enough that I feel confident about the joins without belaboring them too much. I do not encourage this. I'm just being honest about how that often goes. But slipping and scoring.
I only use water with bees.
Really? Okay, good. Okay. I was like, people are out there using magic water and like, oh, you gotta look it up.
Tell us about the magic water.
Well, I don't even know what it is, but people use it. Does anyone know what magic water, what's actually in magic water?
I think that's like sodium silicate.
Is it sodium silicate?
Or is it soda ash? I don't remember. I use
Yeah. Vinegar is great. I will say there are attachments where I like get obsessive. And like this one, you know, I know that it's gonna be on there pretty good. I slow dry it so that when I do have attachments, everything has a chance to really set up because the pinches, you know, the edges dry a lot faster than the rest of the pot. So I am a big slow dry advocate when I am doing attachments. But with things like these, I started doing all these like little, I call them like little rattlesnakes. Those, I really get those on there because I'm putting them on there and then pinching off. So There is stuff I like. I just, you know.
Is that hollow or are you worried about trapping the air?
Yeah, because I often pinch the feet, I'll attach it like this and leave it. It gives like a little bit of extra structure, and then I cut out so that I am not trapping that air there. But you're totally right. I have like a little gap of air in there, and I'll leave that until I'm kind of done with the pot and then cut that out.
Like cut it out like from the top and then.
Yeah, I'll do like a little, and then I stamp it. It's kind of, that's like my final little part of the process. Okay, cool. We got like a little foot on there. It's gonna be so fun. But now we have all this like other cool stuff to pinch. And with a thing like this, you know, you can like really get super creative, and this is where the pinches can get like really big and fun. But, you know, like I've got my overhang here again. So I'm really gathering up what clay I've got there.
So unless that's an added oil, you can't really pull from the pot anymore, or can you still let that in the pot?
Can't really pull from the.
Pull clay from the pot.
Yeah, I'm just, in this case, I'm just like feeling the coil itself.
Yeah.
And when I'm doing this sort of like back and forth, that's me like gathering up that clay right against the wall of the pot so that I have it to bring forward. But yeah, I'm not going into the pot itself.
So when you make the dome, you let it set up and then add the coils, or you're saying you just have to go for it all at once?
Yeah, if I have to leave the dome, I'll cover the dome, of course, and like leave and let it stay there. But I like everything to stay as much the same moisture level as possible. Just making myself conscious of the and I want the coils to get on there as wet as possible. Because the dome is closed, it can take the pressure of adding the coil. Yeah, because the air is in there, I don't have any trouble with it collapsing. So I usually just fill the dome, put the coils right on there. Yeah. And we have this like little extra bit. I don't know. You can think of all kinds of fun things. Sometimes I'll like leave a pinch and then come back to it and see if I want to do any more. Same with this, like maybe I'll add these like little indents coming up at some point. Like I'm just constantly thinking of these different transitions. But we have all of this clay. And this is getting a little bit dry, but yeah, I typically draw it on first, and then after I draw it on, I'll use a couple of different coils to connect it. But these ones, let's see what we can get. So, again, my first step is kind of like separating out the clay that's there. And then maybe with this, I'll separate out a couple of them and just like feel, you know, like this is where the clay is at, basically. It gives me a sense of where those little nodules are. And once they're there, then I can come in and I can move them, you know. a couple of like, I'll build like a couple of the domes or something if I'm building a couple big pieces. These, I'll do one and be done, and then do one and be done.
And you said some that take multiple like feet to play with?
Yeah,
So you do work on multiple pieces at once?
yeah, multiple.
In a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. Yes. In several ways, yeah.
Are you like super like, I mean I know you have great situation with like with play, but are you like being really mindful about like the timeline and where you're at in the process of like making parts? Is that, or do you just like free form, like free flow?
No, I'm pretty conscious of timeline, especially because like, yeah, it's really hard to get as much impression from the pinches as I want once it starts to dry. I feel like I really have to get it when it's pretty damp.
What about, is there a moment after drying that you like can only do a certain type of thing? Like in the library, is there a note that says like has to be done right?
That's such a good question. I love that question so much. Fascinating. Well, what's a pinch? Like, because I've been into a lot of these cutouts lately. I've been into a lot of this like water carving kind of stuff lately. Like using water carving as a way to like enhance and add or like mirror these pinches. So I think maybe that is a new journey for me, is like finding these other kinds of surface techniques once it starts to dry that like mirror the pinch or speak to the same language of the pinch but are not pinches.
Yeah, the water part is what it is.
Yeah. And I've been like really into that, like trying to do the same thing but in these different ways. Yeah, so good question. Yeah. And so with this one, you know, I'll just keep going all the way around and sort of shaping these leaves to match the curve as it goes. But there's like a lot of different things that I think are really beautiful on these foils. You know, even just like something as simple as a pinch down, you know, like looks like these ruffles, like looks like this kind of frill or edging.
It looks like a mermaid fruit bowl.
Yes. Or it's a mermaid fruit bowl. The other thing that's like really changed in my process lately is like the intensity of the pinch, maybe. I think I used to just have a lot more, my pots were a lot more subtle. I was doing the pinches, but they weren't, I wasn't trying to move the clay as much as I could move the clay. And now I've just been like really going for it, I guess. And just feeling like how much of that clay there is. And I think that that has really changed. Oh, and you can see it come up, pulled a little too hard. That's really changed my pots a lot too, made it more exciting.
Speaking of pinching to failure, like
Yeah.
you actually like pinched holes, like perforations.
Yeah, there was like a student in one of my classes, and we were talking about pinch pots and like making your own library of pinches, and she like pinched this loop. So she like made a hole through one of these tabs basically, and then it was like these like loops of clay all the way around, and I was like, that's really cool. So yeah, so I have not done that personally, but I saw her do that, and so look out for those. But they are just, yeah, I thought that that was like a super beautiful way to, like, again, kind of expand what that pinch can be. And there's another, I mean, spending time with these books has been great, but there's another section of this Paul S. Berenson book where he's like, gives this list. Oh my God, I mean, look at the diagrams. But he like gives this list of like pinch, let me see if I can find it somehow. Like when you don't know what to pinch, here's a list of like things that you can pinch. And he's like, pinch a love letter, like pinch a, yeah, you know, and yeah, let's see. Pinch a clay letter to a friend, pinch a pot based on a meditation or concentration or one of the following words, cave, pool, self. Keep repeating the word over and over in your head and body as you work. Pinch a pot from which to eat your favorite food. Pinch an explosion, pinch a wallet. Like, they seem silly, but I think that they're really generative in terms of this like, okay, well the pinch it doesn't just have to be, like what else can a pinch be and have that help you make new pinches with your hands? You know, I would like go through and like do this whole thing, and then I also like to leave, especially on these like big areas, you can do these pinches, these like push in pinches. There's just like so many, and I just feel how far I can go with that clay. You know, all of these kinds of repetitive patterns like that, that's what I really want to highlight with these surface kinds of approaches. And so, you know, I go through and I do all this work, and like at the end, when I'm glazing my piece, I'll dip it in glaze, or, you know, however I want, if I'm using glaze, and then I come and I brush away all those edges. I use my finger to like rub the glaze off of those edges to really like highlight even further that kind of difference, and make sure that like all of those, I want to pick glazes where that texture of the fingers is going to be really visible. And that's another reason why I also, like this one, I soda fired this in like a little soda kiln that I built. And it's not, you know, these little bits are glazed, but the rest of it is not glazed at all. And like that also just does such a beautiful job of highlighting these like little gray edges, this like orange flashing. So a lot of my pieces, I don't put any glaze on. Like these soda fired with no glaze, they end up looking like this like flesh-like, or these like bones, the way that you have these like oranges and grays that naturally get into the crevices. Cool. So if I was working with this, I would keep going, I would cut it off of the bottom, and I would flip it. And once I flipped it, I'll carve out the inside, and I'll pinch that top rim, you know, with some kind of like pinch like one of these, and keep going with that. Another really fun thing that you can do, I like to add, like I was saying, these little rattlesnakes on there. So if I'm gonna do something like that, just smoothing it, yeah, because I shouldn't need to do any thinning out, The wall, I got it to the thickness that I wanted it to get, and then, you know, by like pinching these little bits into it, I'm using the thickness of the wall that I have. So I don't want to get it any thinner, but I do want to just come in and make sure that it's really nice and smooth in there.
So flip it over, how hard do you want the clay to be? How dry do you want the base to be?
Yeah, when I do it, I typically use like some kind of hair dryer or something just to dry this, like this section of the pot. Because I want the top to still be like fairly pinchable on this top rim. So I'll use a hair dryer. I get this really, really nice and stable. I get this really, really nice and stable. And then I'm able to flip it and sit it on top of itself. So it's all about, for me, getting that foot really nice and stable and trying to leave the top of it a little bit damper. It's yeah, like this this top rim, I'm imagining it like almost like just before you would be ready to trim it, if possible, like just pre-leather hard, and this is like just past leather hard. Somehow. It doesn't always work that good. One of the problems that I run into that I try to be careful of is like, if I have these kinds of leaves down here, I want to make sure that if I'm using the hair dryer, I'm like not getting the tips of those leaves. Sometimes I'll use my hand to block it and just spin it. I try to use something to block it because the tips of those leaves will get very dry very quickly. So I also am trying to be like really conscious. So I'll try to be like really conscious and keep it spinning and try and keep my hand protecting like any particularly delicate pinches, because those can crack and split off. So it's a hard thing.
Why do you use a hairdryer over like a heat lamp torch or like propane torch?
Because it feels a little bit less powerful to me, and I'm trying to go as slow as possible.
And if you're protecting with your hand.
Yeah, you don't want to.
Yeah.
Thank goodness not, I know. Yeah.
No, me too. The whole thing gets on
Flames straight on it. So for this, I do roll out coils. So say I'm trying to do like these kinds of, spiral off like rattlesnakes. These I really like because they bring a different kind of balance to the pot. And you can see it especially with these like larger pots. I've been playing a little bit with this like off balance kind of thing. Like you can see the foot on this one is off center. I'll bring it forward. The foot on this one is off center, and like the pot is leaning off to the side like this. So for something like this, and you can see it here too, I'll add like these big sort of like rattlesnake tails, almost like these big handles, to try and balance off that kind of weight. To help balance off that kind of weight. And it's a really fun way to like add that sort of shape and heft without it being, like a full piece of clay. It's like a pitcher handle or something like this. So keep that in mind for these. But for these ones, I will roll a coil. I started off as like a little coil, like this is what I want you to kind of look like. And I want it to be thinner at one end and thicker at the other. I like to use the flat foils with because they work much better for little tails. Sometimes I get these little ridges in them, or not ridges, but like little crack from rolling the foil itself, kind of overlapping each other. And I make sure I get those out so that the impression I'm getting doesn't contain in it these like bits that are different than the kind of finger pinch I want to give it. I'll set up beforehand, and when I set them up, you know, I'll do them in the shape of the kind of handle that I want to have. But the V-Knits is actually incredible, continues to be incredible, and pretty much like out of the bag is great at holding its shape. So I'm gonna find a spot on here where I'm gonna want like a little attachment like that, maybe something like this. I could go all the way around the pot and have these sort of like coming up, almost like this mermaid Medusa or something like. Anyway, my head goes off. So these ones I definitely slip and score because they like to pull with gravity. And so in the kiln, unlike the foot, which all the weight of the pot is sitting on that, these are being pulled downward constantly. And I really want to make sure that they don't pull off, that they don't slip. Got this like crazy snake tail. You know, I'll spend a lot of time joining this and making sure that I'm like scoring the clay around it too, really getting it nice and smooth. It's kind of a funky one because you have to like hold it as you're doing it. So sometimes I'll like hold it with my body and be like smoothing with it. You know? That kind of thing. I wish like the banding wheels had a stop, like a brake of some kind. Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah. Because
I'll wedge a tool in mine.
Right. I want it to do it all. I could have been that. It'll be like foot control, like pneumatics. Foot controls.
Use a chain tool.
Yeah. It hasn't been invented yet. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. So once I get it to this point, and I feel like it's really nice and attached and smoothed down, I prepare myself like I'm at the baseball mound. Like truly, it's ridiculous. I make sure that I don't have any clay on my fingers but then they're wet, and so then I have to dry them. That's really what's happening. It's like there's no clay, they're too wet, okay now. And so, man, I need like a little camera or something. But I'm coming in on either side, and without pinching the clay so thin that it wants to like bend in half, this is when I need the break. I come all the way down from the top to the bottom, doing my little like rattlesnake pinch. And then once it gets there, then I'm like, oh, okay. Like maybe it could sit like that with just the tip there, like that would be so cool. Or like maybe it could come down and all attach it here, and like that tip will come up and sit in that little groove. Like, oh, you know? Like something like that feels really nice. Yeah. And then I'll go all the way around and like kind of repeat that same kind of pattern throughout the pot. And sometimes I'll play with them being like smaller or bigger, that kind of thing. But with these, you know, I like to give myself an impression of how everything's gonna look, and then I'll do final adjustments. And once I do the final adjustments, I'll come in, I'll lift this up, I'll like scratch and slip underneath it. You know, do this little thing, do that little thing, and come in and try and mirror the pinch I've done and really get it like nice and solidified on there. If I feel, you know, typically I'll let these set up beforehand so they're not so wet. But in a case where it starts to slip like this, I do use little, you know, I'll use little supports and things like that. Yeah, and that's how those pots like really start to develop. I've been very into these cutouts lately, as I was saying, and that's kind of where I was going with this larger two-pot piece. And with these kinds of cutouts, I've been thinking of them as like flower vases, but I don't know. And I'll make these little flowers to kind of go around them, and I'll create openings like this with the idea that I can come in and attach a coil around it. And once I've attached that coil, you know, I'll slip and score it on if I'm doing this, but once I attach that coil, now I have all this nice extra clay to work with, and that's how I end up with these kinds of flower openings like that. Where I'll just take the edge and I'll make a little petal and pull that little petal out. Make a little petal, pull that little petal out, all the way around the edge of that coil. You know, and those become these like really beautiful, floral, inviting kind of openings there. The other thing I've been doing a lot of lately is See now, I'm like. The other thing I've been doing a lot of lately is making these little flowers and covering the pots in those. And that's a really fun way to also change the shape, because you have these kinds of like, you know, like scattering of flowers over the surface, and that can like come through this sort of dip here, and it can fill like the valley of that dip. And to make those, I just make these little wheels of clay. This is how I make these buttons too. And same thing. I'm just going around the edge. I'm pinching out those little petals. I'll come in and, you know, maybe it's gonna help highlight these floral openings. I'll score each side and come in and press that in. And you can do like a whole variety of flowers that way. Like a lot of really tiny ones, a lot of medium ones. And I really, this kind of like maximalism is not really how I like see myself, but it's how I see my pots. And this kind of approach of adding and adding and adding layers and layers and layers of like repetitive textures, to me starts to become this like blur. And I feel like you look at something that's like maximalism, like covered with all of these like pinches and all of these little edges and angles, and that starts to become like almost so maximal that it becomes minimal again, that it like, your brain just like takes in the repetitive whole. And so when I look at my pots, I think that's more what I'm seeing when I see them, is like the blur of all these textures together. And I'm just trying to like add enough of all these different structures and pinches and textures and touches and process that it like spins together fast enough that it holds. Yeah. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.